Communication overwhelmingly is nonverbal. And remember, the message recipient is the one that changes the way the message gets delivered.
Listen until the other person's done. Listen until they're done. Your brain works fast enough that you can still think of your response after that. Communication is so critical. And it's not your friend that talks over you that we're talking about today. It's you and me.
I love the golden rule, but it does not necessarily work all the time for communication. You have to go above and beyond how you want to be communicated with and really understand what the person you're communicating with wants to know, needs to know, and how that information is being delivered to them.
Marketing leadership isn't about having the loudest voice. It's about having the clearest one.
Are you tired of doing the same thing in repeating situations which end up with the same result? Maybe it's time for a new perspective. This is Viewpoints on the Multifamily Media Network. Our hosts discuss a topic from different angles and provide actionable ideas. Maybe a new view would change the outcome. Welcome to MMN Viewpoints.
Hey there, I'm Paul Rhodes, host of the Maintenance Mindset podcast, and communication as a topic hits differently for apartment maintenance professionals. The people who are on site taking care of our residents and arguably is the best way to communicate to our residents that we want them. The reason why I say that communication to or for our maintenance teams hits differently than typically viewed goes back to one of the very first presentation trainings I ever attended. When I started training as a full-time job, when I worked for the supplier, they sent me to a train the trainer course, something along the lines of, this is the best way to hold a room's attention and have stage presence and how you develop what your conversation moments are and your stories and the important points and all of the whatever it is that you're going to be talking about. I distinctly remember sitting in that classroom, getting ready, and quite honestly, a little bit of sweat building up on my forehead because I knew I was going to have to present to these other presenters the specific lessons that they were trying to teach us. And they pulled up on their whiteboard, because this was even still before PowerPoint was in heavy use. They pulled up on a whiteboard these statistics that still to this day give me pause. The statistics are from a study by Dr. Albert Marimbian, and it talks about what methodology is used when presenting, when communicating. The methodology that's used for your message to be communicated and understood or even just received by your listener. And the statistics went like this. If you have something you want to get across, 55% of your message is actually delivered through nonverbal communication. 38% of your message is delivered through your tone of voice. And 7% of your message is delivered through the actual words that you say or what the actual content is. Now, I don't have anything to refute it, but so the end result is those numbers are out there. And more than the actual numbers or percentages, I think what's important for us to realize is that it's not only what we say, but it's how it is said. Now, that translates for our on-site maintenance teams when we have policies or procedures. I mean, heck, let's even take it beyond policies and procedures for our on-site maintenance workers. The question for you: what are we actually saying to our maintenance teams about the type of communication that we as an organization are directing at or towards them. See, here's an example of why I think that's a very important question. Because at your organization, how is official communication or summaries of communication delivered to your workers? Chances are the answer is some form of digital communication. Email, private messages through Teams or Messenger or Slack or whatever chat platform you're using. What about portals or various intranet communication methodologies? All of these are commonplace within the corporate world, within our offices. People who sit at a computer all day long. What about your maintenance teams? See, this is a challenge that as a trainer for maintenance workers, associations and vendors who provide training are at a loss. Because if there is a training or something that these third-party vendors or associations needs to get directly to their intended maintenance audience, they can't. I know. Several of you right now, if you're driving or however you're listening to this particular message, you may be saying, yeah, but my maintenance team, they all have emails. They have an address. They get and receive emails. I'm actually going to respectfully push back a little. Do they, though? I mean, many of our properties still do not have a computer for their maintenance team members to use. And if they do, it's possibly only being used by the maintenance supervisors at your properties. And that maintenance supervisor, if we did an audit for how well that computer is being used, what we'll find is they have a limited number of bookmarks or a limited number of screens on whatever browser they're using that are always there. And when they get finished, they don't close out of them. They may exit the website or they may get kicked off the website, but it is kept up there so that our maintenance teams get on and off as quickly as possible. And by the way, the use of maintenance team, I use that very loosely because generally speaking, our teams themselves are not using the computer. Okay. If you push it back, and I'm willing to be wrong, I'm happy to be wrong. What about your compliance training? How well does the fair housing that many of our management companies require on an annual or even more frequent basis, how well is that happening? How much tracking down and actual enforcement has to be required in order for that fair housing delivered in many cases by e-learning? How much work has to go into tracking down all of your maintenance team members to ensure that occurred? My guess is quite a bit. It is a frequent complaint by management companies, by learning organizations, training departments to track down their maintenance people. And frequently the reason why is, well, it's online and I don't have a computer. And let's be honest, our office team members, they have a computer, but they're working on the computer. And it's very rare that you see a maintenance worker go up to an office worker and say, hey, I need to kick you off your computer and use it for my training. Let alone, what are the optics on having a maintenance team member sitting at a desk in the office using the computer? Meanwhile, the leasing worker, the person whose computer that is generally assigned to, is not able to use it at that time. You see, all of this goes down to the fact that if we are delivering our digital communication to our on-site teams and one half of our on-site teams don't have access, easy access to a computer, the communication is cutting out directly one half of our office teams. Oh, but wait, I know. Several of us as management and organizations, we're paying our maintenance team members for their cell phone usage or reimbursing. Maybe we even provide a cell phone. And yet, quite frequently, we don't have the email plan or their email even loaded on their phone because after hours email use shouldn't be happening. Not for hourly associates. My understanding of pay code or of payroll and the ordinances of employees are that if our employees receive an email after work, they get paid for that time. Many of our employees don't even know that's a thing. And those that do, we as organizations are still sending emails out after hours and expecting our office teams or maintenance teams to respond off the clock. Therefore, many maintenance organizations say you don't have your email on your phone. And again, we're not communicating effectively or in our desired business method of choice with our maintenance workers, our hourly workers. So the challenge really becomes, how can we get access to them? How can we directly connect with our maintenance workers? The answer, directly, we don't. Many suppliers have to figure out a new way of gaining access to this valuable customer base, this valuable team members, and they have to end up going through somebody. In other words, they direct the communication that's intended for their maintenance teams at property managers. And let's be honest, not to take anything and no judgment towards, not to take anything away or provide judgment towards our property managers, they're busy enough to have to try and play middle person for the maintenance team to receive a message. So how can we do this? I don't have an answer, except to say, let's identify it as a problem. I mean, I know for a fact there are methodologies and ways of limiting and coding or programming email systems to only operate within certain hours. In other words, your email program, your email address is only active from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. On the weekends, it doesn't work at all. It's a business email. Why can't we do that? We can. There is that functionality. I mean, some of our maintenance apps that we end up using to get service requests, some of those shut off after hours. Why can't we do that with email or our messaging platform or whatever way we go about communicating? What I'm trying to get at here is, how do we communicate directly with our teams in a way that, remember, non-verbally is the majority way that messages are received. Therefore, if our maintenance technicians are unable to actually see the words, that 7%, then how are they expecting, what message are they actually receiving out of the 93% that messages go through? Are they receiving that maintenance is not important enough to communicate with? Where they're not important enough for us to find a workaround between law and productivity? I mean, heck, just from a possible solution standpoint, Chromebooks are cheaper. They're less expensive and have a long life than a Windows type or even an Apple computer. And those, all you need to do is connect to the internet, and they can get all of the internet email platforms. So many of our learning platforms, for that matter, for the e-learning courses they need to learn, can connect through the web browser. Oh, one final thing where communication is concerned. How are you getting a hold of your maintenance teams on site? I mean, if a work order comes in during a normal business day, what is the method that you're using to reach out to them and talk? Is it text messaging? All you have to do is be on the receiving end or a part of a teenage group chat, and you realize just how annoying all the dings and buzzes and various noises are for messaging a group chat. What about calling on a cell phone? In other words, if I'm in the office and a work order comes in and I need a maintenance team member to go to a specific apartment because of a flood, that means the easiest thing for me in the office is to pick up my cell phone, because I always have it on me, press the speed dial for my maintenance associate, and wait for them to answer. I know, I'm old school. I put it up to my head. You put it on speakerphone, right? Well, what about the other end of it? I mean, is a cell phone actually designed for a worker in the field who chances are has got tools in their hand or they're doing a job? Heck, Murphy's Law says they're actually underneath a vanity sink right at that time that the cell phone goes off. They have to stop what they're doing, take gloves off, possibly remove eye protection, whatever it is, pick up the cell phone, click it to answer, and then answer. What I'm advocating for here is on communication all the way around. Remember those nonverbals. The recipient, in this case, our maintenance team member, the nonverbal communication is that you will conform to the way I want to deliver the message to you. We need to remember our recipient in mind, the maintenance technician. However you end up running it on your community, I'm an advocate for the old school radio. The nice thing about the old school low technology radio, it is one button communication for everybody on the team. In other words, if I'm in the office and I have a flood happening in whatever apartment, I pick up the radio, press the button, wait a half a second, and begin talking. And everybody with a radio, no matter where they're at on the property, hears the message. They don't have to clean their hands off. They don't have to take anything. They have the message. If it's an emergency, that entails the fastest response. I mean, think back to the cell phone. If I'm in the office, a pipe has broken, I have to call on the phone every one of my technicians individually to see if they can get to it. And they have to answer. If they don't answer, I can't give them the message. I text message it to them. Well, if it's a text message, that's not an emergency. If my hands are busy, I'm not going to pick up my phone. Communication overwhelmingly is nonverbal. And remember, the message recipient is the one that changes the way the message gets delivered based on those statistics. Oh, one last thing. For the technicians out there, if you're listening to this and you're an apartment maintenance technician, do yourself a favor and acknowledge receipt of every message that comes. Give us a thank you, I got it. All of even the Food Network shows that the chefs, whenever the head chef goes, and gives them a new instruction, they yell out, heard, or yes, chef. That's the same sort of thing we're doing here. So technicians, acknowledge when a message has been sent to you. That's a cell phone call going off there now. I just missed it. Is it an emergency? I don't know. I'll find out. Maybe they'll leave me a message. Oh, wait. If it was somebody young, chances are they're not. Yeah, I know. Old guy rant. I'll put it away for now. You know, famous quote that I think about quite frequently is from George Bernard Shaw. And he says, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. That's probably the best way we can receive any communication, maybe even this one. And that is to listen, verbal, nonverbal or not, consider what was attempted to be communicated, and then respond accordingly.
Do you ever have friends or coworkers who start talking before you're actually finished with your sentence? Isn't that just so annoying? But that's not the viewpoint I'm sharing here today. Listen in without thinking what you're going to say next, and I'll tell you. But first, thank you for joining me, Mary Gwyn, on Multifamily Media Network's Viewpoint series. I typically share on PX Multifamily, the People Experience podcast, and I'm glad today to be talking about communication. When you're first dating someone, you think, oh, it's so precious or cute or wonderful when your significant other completes your sentences for you, right? Oh, that's so sweet. But when you've been married 20 some years, it's not so cute anymore, right? In fact, it can be a little annoying, and not always when they complete your sentence are they completing it with what you were planning to say. There's a proverb I have to remind myself of almost every day. It goes like this. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it's a folly and a snare to him. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it's a folly and a snare to him. And I can be the worst. I have to remind myself of it every day because basically it says, listen until the other person's done. Listen until they're done. Your brain works fast enough that you can still think of your response after that. Communication is so critical. And it's not your friend that talks over you that we're talking about today. It's you and me. Is it you? Are you the one who's thinking about what you're going to say before the other person's really finished? It's not just in spoken conversations either. It's often I'll read an email really, really, really fast and start my response. And then if I save it in drafts and reread it, which I would like to do more of, I'll find that I've sometimes missed some key points in the email that came to me. First, the first reason you don't want to be answering before somebody's finished is you might draw conclusions that aren't even the right ones, that aren't even the direction they were going to go with the conversation. So number one, listen so that you draw the right conclusion. And number two, listen so you don't destroy the flow of the conversation for the other person or for yourself. Let it flow. Let them finish. And then third, for people you care about and you work with and you live with, it can actually contribute to feelings of not being heard, not being appreciated when you interrupt or when you finish before they're finished, or when your mind is already forming your conclusion or the next thing you're going to say. It's a discipline, but it's really important because the other leads to all sorts of bad things. So I'll keep trying to do better, to hear people out, to listen fully, to remind myself of that proverb when I mess up. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it's a folly and a snare to him. Don't let that snare trip you up.
Welcome to this month's Viewpoint on communication. My name is Chris Caramanica, host of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance, and co-host of The Turnover here on the Multifamily Media Network. When the topic of communication came across my desk, one of the things that I really wanted to talk about today and my view on it is going back to the golden rule. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. When the golden rule is applied to communication, you really need to emphasize treating others how they would want to be treated, But a more nuanced approach involves adapting your communication style to the other person's personal preferences. This means understanding that effective communication requires empathy and considering the other person's perspective, rather than simply applying a one-size-fits-all approach based on your own personal preferences. The golden rule says treat others the way that you want to be treated. In communication, it means being respectful, honest, and considerate in your interactions. Isn't that how you want to be communicated with? It also encourages active listening, clear language, and avoiding offensive or hurtful communication. But digging a little bit deeper into communication and the golden rule, you need to recognize people's individual differences. People have different communication styles and preferences for information delivery and levels of comfort and directness. When I think about communication, I really think about the receiver first, not me as the person delivering communication. I have a tendency, and I try often, to try to adapt my approach to the receiver of said communication. Effective communicators adjust their style based on the other person's needs and preferences. This might involve using more visual aids with one person, while another may prefer more direct verbal explanation. In our constantly evolving technological nature, some people like a very simple email or a long, drawn-out explanation. Some people want you just to pick up the phone and have a phone conversation with them, or they can wait for a meeting. And I find myself more often than not sending text messages or using other types of media, really depending on how that person likes to be communicated with. You also need to focus on your understanding. Rather than just broadcasting a message, focus on the group or individual person that you're sending communication to, making sure that you understand how it's going to be heard and received by your audience. You also have to be mindful of nonverbal cues when you're in person or even on a Teams or Zoom meeting. Paying attention to body language, tone of voice, and other nonverbal signals to gauge the other person's reaction and adjust accordingly. You also need to prioritize clarity and conciseness. Avoid jargon and overly complex language, especially if you're unsure of the person's background or familiarity with the topic. See, I work in maintenance, so for me, I always try to make sure that my receiver of my communication understands the why behind what I'm explaining. And if I'm starting to use technical jargon or shorthand that I can use with other maintenance professionals, I really try to make sure that I'm well understood and use much more layman's terms or using examples that the receiver may be familiar with. At the end of the day, communication is really about making sure that you're expressing a level of empathy so that there's understanding and considering the other person's perspective, their knowledge base, and their communication preferences. You also need to be able to adapt your communication styles to each individual you're talking to or even a group. And last but not least, respect. Treating others with the consideration and courtesy you would want them to show you, but also recognizing their individual communication styles. I love the golden rule, but it does not necessarily work all the time for communication. You have to go above and beyond how you want to be communicated with and really understand what the person you're communicating with wants to know, needs to know, and how that information is being delivered to them.
Hey friends, Janet Rosseth here. I'm the host of the Optimized Podcast, a marketing performance podcast, and I'm joining this Viewpoint conversation on communication with tips for mainly marketers, but I really want to bring this to anyone who plays a role in a corporate department or centralized department where you're managing and leading from the middle. Communication could not be any more important from this position because often you aren't necessarily the decision maker, but you touch all points of the organization. So for marketers especially, the role that we play, we are tapped into IT and HR and operations, all different facets of the business, leasing, and the communication that we use is really important. I'm going to talk about a couple of different tactics and leadership communication for marketing here. One is communicating up, down, and across. This, I think, is one of the most important skills for marketers and for department leaders to understand, because the message that you're sending around a certain initiative is very, very different if you're communicating to executives versus communicating to frontline roles such as property teams. So let's talk first about communicating upward to executives. It's more than just sharing reports. It's about translating marketing performance into business impact. Executives don't want to hear how many emails were opened last month. They want to know how marketing is driving occupancy, retention, and revenue. So when you're crafting upward communication, it's more about making it strategic and concise and leading with insights, not necessarily activity. It's really important also to use visuals to tell your stories. Simple occupancy chart or reputation trend line can tell a much bigger story than a 3-paragraph email. And frankly, those long emails don't get read. So if you do yourself the favor of putting something like action needed in the subject line and highlighting the certain area where you really need that executive or senior leader to read in and answer a question if you're waiting on a decision, that's really important too. So clear executive briefs can help define where you need their attention most. And here's a tip too. You're going to hit speed bumps in new initiatives and communicating up, down, and across. So when you hit those speed bumps, or when crisis hits or a rollout goes sideways, and it will, that happens, executives don't expect perfection, but they do expect transparency. Keep them in the loop, even when you don't have full control over the situation yet. Bringing them in the loop, owning the narrative, and showing that you're in control of the moment and seeking solutions really can save the communication later from becoming a much bigger topic and stressful conversation. Okay, let's talk next about communicating laterally or across the organization. So when you're launching a new initiative from the marketing department or from any central department position, you're often reliant on the other departments around you, and that communication often gets failed to be shared. So make sure that you collaborate with operations, technology, HR, and other teammates. Let me just give you the example of launching a new CRM. So you have potentially new policies that HR needs to be a part of, and you have potentially new integrations that IT needs to be aware of. And perhaps there's even new reporting that accounting maybe needs to weigh in on as well. So this is where a lot of projects succeed or stall out, because these fellow department members are really the people who have your back in this situation. So you want to make sure that they are fueling and supporting your initiative rather than feeling blindsided or frustrated by suddenly taking on work that they weren't realizing you were going to be giving them. So one of the biggest traps that marketers fall into is assuming alignment without actually confirming it. So we fire off emails and slide decks. We expect people to read between the lines. You send out an initiative to the whole organization saying the new CRM launches in September. But if you failed to communicate to those other departments what their role is going to be and where they might need to play a part in the launch or support, then you've set them up for failure and you haven't given them the chance to learn their portion and plan for their portion. So it catches them off guard. Think about how you'd feel in that situation. So let's go back to the example of launching a new CRM. It's not enough just to send an announcement. You want to walk side by side with your peers and listen to their friction points, explain how the change affects them, and collaborate on how best to work together to launch that system and support the teams going forward. In fact, truly, this really shouldn't be a new topic to anybody. For the first time that you send communication launching a new CRM, I would hope that it's not new news to anyone in the organization, that you've already been communicating that there are gaps in performance and opportunities to seam things up and tighten the process. And so when that announcement comes, it should be one that is a win for everybody because you've already been talking about it for months. So another way to make sure that you're successful with those other departments is regular meetings, weekly check-ins, monthly portfolio reviews. Just create that rhythm and alignment so that they don't have to be formal presentations. They're just a consistent space where you can talk through what's working, what's not, and where there might be gaps and support needed down the road. Okay, next up is part 3, I'll call it, and that's communicating downward to on-site teams. Your site teams are the front line. So whether you're in a marketing role or you're listening to this portion of the Viewpoint here from the seat of a marketing department or IT or even HR or maintenance, we have to always remind ourselves that those on-site teams are the ones that are turning our strategies into real life impact. So for marketing, they're turning our marketing strategy into real life conversations, tours, and leases. This isn't what they focus on all day long. They've got residents coming in their door and vendors coming in their door and conversations about renewals and tours and, potential maintenance issues. So this is not their only focus. So you really need to make sure that you show that you understand the needs that come at them on a daily basis, because they are some of the most overwhelmed and undercommunicated groups in the business. Too often, changes get rolled out or new initiatives get rolled out without enough context, and that leaves everybody looking for more answers and support. So you want to make sure that you have that buy-in early on. So communicating downward to teams, the most important piece is communicating the why behind the what. This is where you're going to get the most impact on buy-in and execution and support going forward and optimal use of that new CRM or buy-in on that new initiative you're working on. So communicating downward means prepping your teams early, training them often, and reinforcing messages across multiple channels. Do not count on that one single email when you launch the new initiative. Think layered communication, maybe a visual cheat sheet that sits by their laptop, a quick video walkthrough, a Slack reminder here and there, a live Q&A, and maybe even a tip every Tuesday to make sure that they are continuing to work towards optimal performance. And most importantly, build a feedback loop. Your site teams should be able to tell you freely what's working and what's not without feeling like you're going to take it personally because this was your big initiative. So make sure that you create a space where you're listening to them, where you're coming alongside them. You're maybe testing the processes with them in the trenches. Ask them, involve them. It's one of the best ways to turn passive messaging into active engagement. So the piece there that I really want you to understand is when you're not part of the conversation, then there's all sorts of, I'll call it venting, happening behind the scenes that you're not in on. But if you're part of the conversation alongside them the whole way, they'll bring that message to you instead of to their peers, and it'll be received much more positively. And in moments of confusion or crisis, make sure that you lean in and over communicate. Silence creates frustration, but clarity creates calm. Okay, and the last piece I want to talk about, I'll call it part 4, is communicating to win cross-functional buy-in. So the last piece of this communication puzzle for marketing leaders is all about influence. We say this all the time with my team and with all of our clients that marketing is responsible for driving a lot of change across the organization with influence, not authority. So often multifamily marketers are tasked with driving change, driving initiatives that require others to say yes and to adopt new working styles, but they don't report to us. So it can be very challenging to gain that momentum and that buy-in if you aren't doing it via influence and credibility. So whether you're trying to implement the CRM as an example or a new review response standards, pushing forward a rebranding effort, your success of your plans really depends on how well you pitch it and how much buy-in you have with those on-site teams. So that starts with positioning marketing not as a support function, but as a strategic driver of revenue and performance. And credibility and confidence really prop up your influence in these situations. So hopefully you've already been in a position where you have a good relationship with your cross department and your senior leaders and your on property teams. And they've already got the credibility behind you of knowing that when you tackle big things like this, you do it with empathy, you do it with confidence, and you do it with the why behind the what. So focus on data that matters to your audience. Make sure you know which audience, like we talked about, communicating up, down, and across. And remember that there's a growing role here for AI in communication. You can use ChatGPT or whatever your AI of choice is to really help you craft that message and refine it so that it comes across positive and confident. But here's the nuance. Don't use AI alone. Use it to assist, not replace. It can streamline a process and it can draft responses and help with reporting, but your message still needs to be your voice, your judgment, and your ability to connect with that human emotion. You know your on-site teams and the rest of those audiences and where they're going to feel a sense of stress, anxiety, or maybe even enthusiasm and excitement in a situation. So the key is to really earn the trust in all levels of this communication, because trust is built through clear, credible, consistent communication. As you head into your next project or presentation or portfolio meeting, I want you to ask yourself, am I communicating with intention in every direction, up, down, and across? And am I giving execs the clarity they need, peers the alignment they expect, and teams the support that they deserve? Because marketing leadership isn't about having the loudest voice. It's about having the clearest one.
Before you leave this episode, answer these questions for an action plan based on the perspectives you've heard today. First, what idea caught my attention? Second, what was identified as something that I need to discontinue? The answers noted are a place to start for improved success. To go deeper, check out the shows by hosts you've heard from today. Thank you for being open to different viewpoints. This has been a Multifamily Media Network production.